Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Return. Liam Knox stood at the airport terminal, his weathered face reflecting the harsh realities he'd endured for 7 years. At 43, his once jet black hair now showcased streaks of silver at the temples, badges of the sacrifice he'd made for his family. The international construction company had offered him a fortune to oversee their most dangerous projects in war-torn regions across the Middle East and Africa, a position nobody wanted. But Liam had taken it without hesitation. Your family will be set for life, his boss had promised when offering the position. For 7 years, Liam had lived in shipping containers and temporary housing, breathing dust and dodging militant attacks, all while sending 90% of his substantial salary home to his wife Diana and their 2 children, Audrey and Cooper. He'd missed birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, sacrificing presents for prosperity. Communication had dwindled over the years. At first, Diana's video calls were frequent, the children always eager to see him. By year 3, they became monthly affairs. By year 5, they were rare, with Diana citing poor connection or the children being busy. But Liam persisted, building their future from afar. Now he clutched his carry-on, the only luggage he needed. His real treasures weren't material possessions, but the financial security he'd built for his family. College funds, paid-off mortgages, and substantial investments. He'd purchased a beautiful vacation property on Lake Tahoe as a surprise, their dream destination where they'd honeymooned 18 years ago. The decision to return had been spontaneous. His final project had finished early, and he'd managed to negotiate an early contract release with a substantial bonus. He hadn't told Diana. He wanted to surprise her. As the taxi pulled up to the suburban Milwaukee home he'd purchased before leaving, Liam felt a strange dissonance. The property looked different, upgraded with an expansive deck, a new garage, and landscaping that screamed professional maintenance. "Nice house," the driver commented. "Should be," Liam answered. "I paid for every brick." Anticipation building. He paid the driver and approached his front door. After 7 years of working in the world's most dangerous places, why did ringing his own doorbell fill him with such inexplicable dread? He pressed the bell, hearing the unfamiliar chime. They'd changed it. Then again, 7 years was enough time for many changes. The door swung open. Diana stood before him, her auburn hair now expertly highlighted, wearing designer clothes he didn't recognize. For a moment, she froze, her face draining of color. No running into his arms. No tears of joy. No warm welcome. "Liam," she finally stated, her voice flat. From behind her, Audrey appeared, now 17 and practically a woman. Next to her stood Cooper, 14, almost as tall as his sister. Neither showed a flicker of recognition. "Mom," Audrey whispered, "who's this guy?" "Nobody," Diana answered sharply, her eyes never leaving Liam's. "Nobody important." A knife to the heart would have been less painful. "Diana, it's me," Liam said, his voice strong despite the confusion. "I'm home." The project finished early. Cooper stepped forward protectively. "Mom said you should leave." Before Liam could respond, another voice called from inside the house. "Diana, who's at the door?" A tall man with salt and pepper hair appeared behind his family, resting his hand possessively on Diana's shoulder. He wore a cashmere sweater and had the manicured look of someone who'd never worked a day of hard labor in his life. "Who's this?" Liam demanded, his contractor's hands, calloused and strong, clenching into fists. Diana finally found her voice. "This is Roland. Roland Baxter. My fiancé." Fiancé. The word felt like acid on Liam's tongue. "We're still married, Diana." Roland's expression shifted from confusion to realization. "You're the ex-husband? The one who abandoned the family." "Abandoned?" Liam's voice dropped dangerously low. "I've been working overseas to support them." "That's not how Diana tells it," Roland replied smoothly. "She said you chose money over family and disappeared years ago." Before Liam could correct this outrageous lie, a car pulled into the driveway. His younger brother Oscar stepped out, expression changing from casual to shock when he spotted Liam. "Well, look who finally crawled back," Oscar called, approaching with a bitter smile. The moneymaker finally failed? Liam stared at his brother, the same brother he'd been sending support payments to for years after Oscar's business had tanked. The same brother who should have been checking on his family while he was away. "Why are you here, Oscar?" Liam asked, his voice calm but deadly. "Sunday dinner," Oscar shrugged. "Roland invited me. He's good like that, takes care of the family. Unlike some people." Behind Oscar, another car arrived. Diana's father, Walter, emerged, his weathered face twisting into a sneer upon seeing Liam. "Why would you show your face now?" Walter spat. "After what you put my daughter through." Liam stood there, surrounded by people he'd sacrificed everything for, all regarding him as an intruder. Even Max, the German shepherd he'd brought home as a puppy before leaving, growled from behind Cooper's legs, not recognizing his original master. In that moment, Liam understood. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a complete rewriting of history. He stepped back, his face betraying nothing of the volcanic rage building inside him. "I understand," he said simply. Their relief at his apparent retreat was palpable. "I'll be in touch," he added, turning to leave. "Don't bother," Diana called after him. "We've moved on." Liam walked away without looking back, his mind already shifting from shock to something colder and more calculated. 7 years in conflict zones had taught him many things, including how to identify enemies and plan strategic responses. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. Chapter 2. Revelations. Liam checked into the Grayson Hotel downtown, a modest establishment where he could collect his thoughts. The spacious suite felt empty compared to the shipping container that had been his home for years, but at least here he could think clearly. His phone buzzed, a text from Bernard Whitfield, his financial advisor and one of the few people who had kept in regular contact during his overseas stint. "Heard you're back in town. Need to talk ASAP. My office tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bernard was more than just a financial advisor. He was the closest thing Liam had to a friend. They'd served together in the Marines before civilian life, and when Liam had started making serious money on dangerous overseas projects, Bernard was the one he trusted to manage it. The next morning, Bernard's expression was grim when Liam entered his downtown office. "You didn't tell me you were coming back early," Bernard said, bypassing pleasantries. "It was supposed to be a surprise," Liam replied flatly. Bernard sighed, sliding a thick folder across his desk. "Then I guess we're both full of surprises today." For the next hour, Bernard laid out what he'd discovered. Diana had been systematically draining their accounts for years. Not all at once, Bernard would have noticed that, but gradually transferring money to private accounts and making substantial cash withdrawals. "I suspected something was off about 2 years ago," Bernard explained. "The withdrawal patterns changed, but legally, she had access. You made sure of that." Liam nodded numbly. "How much?" "About 30% of what you sent home. The good news is, I managed to secure the majority in investments she couldn't touch due to the paperwork we set up." Bernard hesitated before continuing. "There's more. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago." "You what?" Something felt wrong, Liam. The way she dodged questions about investment priorities during our quarterly calls. "I've been managing money for 20 years. I know when someone's hiding something." The PI's report was comprehensive. Diana and Roland had been involved for nearly 5 years. Roland, a real estate developer with a string of failed ventures, had met Diana at a charity function. Within months, they were involved. By year 2, he had moved his things into the house when the children were at school, leaving before they returned home. By year 3, he had essentially taken Liam's place, attending school functions and family events. Most damning were the conversations the PI had recorded. Diana and Roland laughing about the sucker overseas who kept sending money while Roland enjoyed his wife and home. "I'm sorry," Bernard said quietly. "If I'd known earlier." Liam shook his head. "Not your fault." "There's one more thing," Bernard added reluctantly. "Your brother Oscar has been part of this too. He's been working for Roland's company for the past 4 years, despite the monthly support payments you've been sending him." The betrayal was complete. Diana, Roland, Oscar, possibly even his children, all benefiting from his sacrifice while erasing him from their lives. What are you going to do? Bernard asked, concerned by Liam's eerie calm. First, I need a complete picture, Liam answered. Diana filed for divorce 3 years ago, used abandonment as grounds. But I never received any paperwork. Bernard's expression darkened. They used your overseas address, knowing mail delivery was unreliable in conflict zones. When you didn't respond, they proceeded with a default judgment. So legally, you're divorced. But the financial settlement is still pending. Diana's lawyer has been pushing for the court to liquidate everything, including your protected investments. Liam nodded slowly. Who's her lawyer? Guy named Philip Thornton. Thornton, Liam repeated, memorizing the name. And Roland's business? Baxter Development Group. They've been buying up properties on the north side. Nothing spectacular, but they've secured some interesting zoning variances recently. Liam stood, his decision made. I need you to do something for me, Bernard. Liquidate $5 million from my overseas accounts. I want cash, bearer bonds, and gold, untraceable. And I need a secure location to store it. Bernard's eyebrows shot up. Liam, what are you planning? Information gathering, Liam replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just need operating capital. This sounds more like war preparation. Liam's expression turned hard. That's exactly what it is. As he left Bernard's office, Liam made a call to a number few civilians would recognize. A private security contractor who owed him several favors from their time in Kandahar. Jackson, it's Knox. I'm calling in those markers. I need a team. Discreet, thorough, and with nothing to lose. Chapter 3. The Architect of Revenge. Liam established his base of operations in a luxury penthouse apartment downtown, paid for in cash through a shell company Bernard had quietly established years earlier as part of Liam's investment portfolio. The 3-bedroom space offered panoramic views of the city and, more importantly, complete privacy. Within 2 days, his team began to assemble. First came Mira Voss, a cybersecurity specialist with a background in both government and private sector work. Her slight frame and quiet demeanor belied her reputation as one of the most formidable hackers in the business. The payment is satisfactory, she noted, reviewing the contract. But I'm more interested in the challenge. Corporate security systems, personal devices, financial records. You're asking for complete digital penetration. Will that be a problem? Liam asked. Myra's smile was thin. Not for me. Just making sure you understand what you're purchasing. Next arrived Damon Cross, a former detective forced out of the police department after a controversial shooting. His investigative skills remained sharp, and his network of contact within law enforcement remained intact despite his official status. Your wife's fiancé, Damon reported after his first day of investigation, isn't just a small-time developer. Roland Baxter comes from old money that dried up 2 generations ago. He's been trying to rebuild the family fortune through increasingly desperate ventures. And my brother's involvement? Oscar handles community relations, schmoozing with planning commissions, zoning boards, that sort of thing. His previous business failure seems to have been carefully orchestrated. Filed bankruptcy the same month he started working for Baxter, which protected his assets while discharging debts. The final member of Liam's team was Colin Fletcher, a financial forensic specialist who had previously worked for the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. His specialty was following money trails that others wanted hidden. Your wife's been smart, Colin noted, reviewing Diana's financial activities. Not smart enough, but careful. The money she siphoned from your accounts has been moving through a series of shell companies before ending up in ventures controlled by Baxter. On paper, she's not directly connected. And Roland's business? Colin's expression grew serious. That's where it gets interesting. Baxter Development has been buying properties along the proposed light rail expansion route, properties that mysteriously receive zoning changes just before purchase. The timing suggests insider information. Liam absorbed this information, the pieces falling into place. My father-in-law, Walter, sits on the City Planning Commission. Indeed he does, Colin confirmed, and has voted in favor of every variance requested by Baxter Development. For 3 weeks, Liam's team gathered intelligence, building a comprehensive picture of the elaborate betrayal orchestrated against him. Diana hadn't just taken another lover. She had systematically worked to erase Liam's existence while using his money to finance Roland's business ventures. Oscar hadn't just abandoned his brother. He had actively participated in the scheme, using his connections to facilitate Roland's property deals while continuing to accept Liam's financial support. Walter hadn't just sided with his daughter. He had abused his position on the Planning Commission to provide insider information about the city's development plans, allowing Roland to purchase properties that would skyrocket in value once the light rail project was announced publicly. Even more painful was what Liam discovered about his children. Myra's digital surveillance revealed text messages showing that Audrey and Cooper had been coached on what to say when Liam returned. "Just pretend you don't remember him," Diana had instructed. "It'll be easier that way." Only Bernard had remained loyal, quietly protecting what he could of Liam's assets while trying to uncover the truth. On the 25th day after his return, Liam gathered his team in the penthouse for a final briefing. "We now have a complete picture," he announced. "Everyone's roles, motivations, and vulnerabilities are clear." "What's the objective?" Damon asked. "Evidence gathering for a legal case." Liam's expression was cold. "No, there will be no lawsuits, no police reports, no court appearances. That would be too merciful." He unrolled architectural plans across the conference table, detailed schematics of what appeared to be a resort property. "This is Lakeview Lodge," Liam explained. "A luxury retreat on Lake Tahoe I purchased 3 years ago through a holding company. It's been renovated according to my specifications, including certain custom features." The team studied the plans, their expressions growing increasingly concerned as they noted the unusual aspects of the property's design. "2 days from now, I'll be making a phone call," Liam continued. "Everyone who betrayed me will receive an invitation they won't be able to refuse. And then the real work begins." Mira looked up from the plans. "These renovations, they're designed for psychological warfare." "Precisely," Liam confirmed. "I spent 7 years in war zones, learning how environments can be weaponized. Now I'm putting that knowledge to use." "This goes beyond revenge," Colin warned. "What you're describing is justice," Liam interrupted, "delivered by the only person who still remembers what that word means." As his team exchanged uncomfortable glances, Liam's phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Diana's lawyer, demanding an immediate meeting to discuss the financial settlement of their divorce. Perfect timing. "Tomorrow," Liam announced, "we extend our first invitation. Diana and her lawyer will come here, thinking they're negotiating from a position of strength." His smile was terrifying in its calmness. They have no idea what's waiting for them. Chapter 4. First Blood. Philip Thornton had the polished arrogance of a lawyer who'd never lost a high-profile divorce case. His tailored suit and monogrammed cufflink spoke of success, as did his condescending smile when he entered Liam's penthouse with Diana at his side. Diana had dressed carefully for the occasion in a conservative navy suit that projected both wealth and respectability. Her expression was a practiced mask of dignified suffering, the abandoned wife finally confronting her negligent husband. "Mr. Knox," Thornton began after declining refreshments, "I appreciate your willingness to meet. Perhaps we can resolve this matter efficiently." Liam, dressed in a simple black suit that highlighted his physique, hardened by years of physical labor rather than gym workouts, gestured toward the conference table where documents were neatly arranged. "Efficiency is my specialty," he replied, his voice neutral. Diana barely glanced at him, keeping her eyes fixed on the panoramic windows. She'd clearly prepared herself to face the broken, desperate man she expected to find. "Our position is straightforward," Thornton continued, removing documents from his briefcase. "Mrs. Baxter." "Her name is still Knox," Liam interrupted quietly. Thornton's smile tightened. "According to the divorce decree finalized 3 years ago, which you failed to contest, which I was never properly served," Liam corrected. "The court found service sufficient," Thornton countered smoothly. "Regardless, the financial settlement remains open. Given your absence and the client's sole responsibility for raising your children, We're seeking full distribution of all marital assets and investments. Liam nodded thoughtfully. I see. And what about the funds already taken? Diana's head snapped toward him, her composure slipping momentarily. I don't know what you're implying, Thornton responded, but my client has only accessed what was necessary for family maintenance. Liam smiled, sliding a folder across the table. Would family maintenance include $2.4 million transferred to Baxter Development Group over the past 4 years? The color drained from Diana's face. Thornton recovered quickly. Any business investments Mrs. Knox made were within her rights as... Let me be clear, Liam interrupted, his voice still eerily calm. I have comprehensive documentation of every dollar removed from our accounts, every transfer to shell companies, and every investment in Roland's business ventures. I also have documented evidence of insider trading related to the light rail project, facilitated by my father-in-law's position on the Planning Commission. Diana found her voice at last. You're bluffing. In response, Liam pressed a button on a remote. The large television screen on the wall illuminated, showing footage of Diana and Roland in intimate moments, interspersed with recordings of their conversations about using Liam's money. I've been gathering evidence for 3 weeks, Liam explained as Diana stared at the screen in horror. My team is quite thorough. Thornton attempted to regain control. These recordings are likely inadmissible. This isn't about court admissibility, Liam cut him off. This is about negotiating from a position of truth. He pressed another button, and the screen displayed financial records highlighting the money trail from Liam's accounts to Roland's business. Here's my counteroffer, Liam stated, sliding another document across the table. Diana signs over any remaining claim to my assets. In exchange, I don't provide this evidence to the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the local district attorney. Thornton skimmed the document, his professional demeanor cracking. This is blackmail. This is consequence, Liam corrected. Your client conspired to commit fraud, misappropriation of funds, and potentially insider trading. She can walk away with what she's already taken, which is substantial, or she can face federal charges. Her choice. Diana's carefully constructed facade crumbled entirely. You can't do this. What about Cooper and Audrey? The children you taught to forget me? Liam responded, his voice finally betraying emotion. The ones you instructed to treat me like a stranger. He displayed text messages between Diana and the children, showing her coaching them on how to react to his return. Diana's shock turned to anger. You've been spying on my children? I've been learning the truth, Liam corrected. Something in short supply in this family. Thornton attempted to salvage the situation. Perhaps we can reach a more equitable arrangement. This isn't a negotiation, Liam stated flatly. It's a courtesy notification. Diana signs today, or the evidence goes to authorities tomorrow. After 30 minutes of futile protests and threats, Diana signed the agreement with a shaking hand. As she and her lawyer prepared to leave, Liam delivered his final blow. One more thing, he said casually. I'll be hosting a family gathering at my Lake Tahoe property next weekend. I expect everyone to attend. You, Roland, the children, Oscar, and Walter. Diana stared at him in disbelief. Why will we agree to that? Liam smiled coldly. Because if you don't, the evidence still goes to the authorities. Consider it a transition ceremony. One final family gathering before we go our separate ways. You're insane, Diana whispered. No, Liam replied softly. I'm finally seeing clearly. The invitation will arrive tomorrow with all details. Make sure everyone attends. After they left, Mira emerged from the adjacent room where she'd been monitoring the meeting. Phase 1 complete, she confirmed. Her phone has been cloned and the spyware is installed. We'll have access to all her communications with Roland and the others. Liam nodded, staring at the door through which Diana had just departed. Prepare the Lake Tahoe property. We move to Phase 2. Chapter 5, The Web Titans. The invitation arrived at Diana's house by private courier the following morning. An elegant envelope containing a card with embossed gold lettering. Mr. Liam Knox requests the presence of the Knox and Baxter families for a weekend retreat at Lakeview Lodge, Lake Tahoe. Private air transportation provided. Attendance is mandatory for resolution of all outstanding matters. Included was a list of attendees: Diana, Roland, Audrey, Cooper, Oscar, and Walter. The date was set for 3 days later. Diana immediately called Roland, her voice trembling as she explained what had transpired in Liam's penthouse. "He knows everything," she hissed, pacing her kitchen. "About the money, about your business, about my father's involvement. He has recordings, financial records, everything." Roland's initial bravado quickly faded as Diana detailed the evidence Liam had presented. "This is impossible," he protested. "Nobody could have gathered that much information so quickly." "Well, he did," Diana snapped. "And now he's demanding we all go to some property at Lake Tahoe." "We don't have to do anything," Roland insisted. "He's bluffing about going to the authorities." "Are you willing to risk federal charges on that assumption?" Diana demanded. "Because I'm not, and neither is my father. Walter's already called me in a panic. His entire reputation would be destroyed if this came out." Similar conversations occurred throughout the day as each invitee received their notification. Oscar called Roland in a fury, demanding to know how Liam had discovered his involvement. Walter contacted his personal attorney, seeking assurances about potential legal exposure. From his penthouse command center, Liam and his team monitored these panicked exchanges through the surveillance network they had established. "They're reacting exactly as predicted," Damon noted, listening to the recorded calls. "They're scared but still underestimating you." "Perfect," Liam replied. "Fear makes people compliant, but overconfidence makes them careless." The next morning, Oscar made his move, arriving unannounced at Liam's penthouse. Security allowed him up per Liam's instructions. "Brother," Oscar greeted with forced joviality when Liam opened the door. "We need to talk." Liam gestured him inside without warmth. "By all means." Oscar whistled, taking in the luxury apartment. "Nice place. Different from those shipping containers you mentioned in your emails." "I saved my money," Liam replied simply. "Something you might have considered." Oscar's friendly demeanor slipped momentarily before he recovered. "Look, about this Lake Tahoe thing, it's unnecessary. Whatever issues you have with Diana and Roland, they don't involve me." Liam poured himself a whiskey, not offering one to his brother. "Is that what you think?" "I know I should have been more present while you were gone," Oscar admitted, attempting to sound sincere. "But I was dealing with my own problems. The business failure hit me hard." "Yes, the conveniently timed bankruptcy that protected your assets while discharging your debts," Liam noted. "Filed the same month you started working for Roland." Oscar's expression froze. "That's not—" "Please," Liam interrupted. "Don't insult my intelligence. You've been working as Roland's community liaison for 4 years, helping secure zoning changes through your connections, all while accepting monthly support payments from me." "I needed that money," Oscar protested weakly. "And Roland needed your connections," Liam finished. "A mutually beneficial arrangement at my expense." Oscar abandoned the pretense. "What do you want? Money? I can pay back what you sent." "I want you at Lake Tahoe," Liam answered simply. "You, Diana, Roland, the children, Walter, everyone who participated in erasing me from my own life while benefiting from my sacrifice." "For what purpose?" Liam smiled thinly. "Closure." Oscar studied his brother's face, seeing something that clearly disturbed him. "You've changed, Liam." 7 years in war zones will do that, Liam agreed. "You learn who your real enemies are." After Oscar left, Mira confirmed that the tracking software had been successfully installed on his phone during his visit, the real purpose behind Liam allowing the meeting. "Now we have full surveillance on Diana, Roland, Oscar, and Walter," she reported. "Only the children remain. They'll be at the school fundraiser tonight," Liam noted. "The one Roland is sponsoring to boost his community image." Damon raised an eyebrow. "You're attending a school function?" "No," Liam replied. "But you are, as a potential donor interested in Baxter's development projects. Get close enough to clone their phones." That night, while Damon executed his mission at the school event, Liam reviewed the final preparations for Lakeview Lodge with Colin. "The property modifications are complete," Colin confirmed. Individual rooms prepared according to specifications, security systems tested, isolation protocols functional. And our legal protection? The property is owned by an offshore corporation with no traceable connection to you. The staff has been replaced with our contracted personnel, all with proper hospitality credentials, but specialized backgrounds. The airspace has been registered for private use, and lake access is restricted to the property's private dock. Liam nodded in satisfaction. And the psychological profiles? Colin opened 5 detailed dossiers, one for each adult guest. Complete. Diana fears public humiliation above all else. Roland's primary anxiety is financial failure. Oscar cannot stand being perceived as the lesser brother. Walter's reputation in the community is his most prized possession. And the children? Colin hesitated. Audrey and Cooper are victims in this, Liam. They were manipulated. They were participants, Liam corrected coldly. They knew who I was and chose to pretend otherwise. They accepted the narrative that I abandoned them, despite years of video calls and financial support. They're teenagers. Their mother had influence, yes, but they made choices. Liam's expression softened slightly. Their rooms are different from the others, less intense. This is about education, not punishment. The following morning, a luxury SUV arrived at Diana's house to transport the family to the private airfield. Similar vehicles collected Oscar and Walter from their respective homes. As the private jet bearing his guests took off, Liam boarded his own aircraft, a military-grade helicopter that would allow him to arrive at Lakeview Lodge well ahead of them. The stage was set. The players were in motion, and Liam Knox, architect of the most meticulously planned revenge in history, allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before the real work began. Chapter 6. Welcome to Lakeview Lodge. Lakeview Lodge presented an image of rustic luxury nestled among towering pines at the edge of Lake Tahoe. The main building featured a massive timber frame design with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the crystal-clear waters. 5 private guest cabins surrounded the main lodge, each offering apparent privacy while remaining within the property's secured perimeter. The 8-acre estate was isolated from neighboring properties by dense forest on 3 sides and the lake on the 4th. A single access road connected to the main highway, while a private dock provided water access. To casual observation, it appeared to be nothing more than an exclusive retreat for the wealthy. Appearances, as Liam knew all too well, could be deceiving. The private jet carrying his guests landed at the small regional airport, where luxury SUVs awaited to transport them the final 30 minutes to the property. Upon arrival, they found the main lodge welcoming, with a roaring fire in the massive stone fireplace and staff members offering refreshments. Liam greeted them in the great room, dressed casually in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater. "Welcome to Lakeview Lodge," he announced. "You're home for the next 3 days." Diana glanced around nervously. "This is unexpected." "I've always appreciated irony," Liam replied. "This property sits not far from where we honeymooned 18 years ago. Remember?" Diana shifted uncomfortably, while Roland maintained a protective stance beside her. The children, Audrey and Cooper, stood awkwardly, clearly uncertain about their role in this strange family gathering. Oscar attempted to break the tension. "Hell of a place, brother. Real estate investment." "Something like that," Liam answered. "Brandon will show you all to your accommodations. We'll gather for dinner at 7. Brandon, a former military operative now posing as the lodge manager, led the group to their assigned cabins. Each had been carefully prepared according to Liam's specifications. Diana and Roland were given the blue pine cabin, decorated with subtle reminders of Liam's presence during their marriage. Family photos he'd sent from overseas were artfully displayed on walls and shelves, while the sound system had been programmed to occasionally play snippets of Diana's voice from recorded video calls, praising Liam's sacrifice and promising eternal love. Oscar was assigned the cedar cabin, where financial documents detailing his monthly support payments from Liam had been incorporated into the decor, along with bankruptcy filings that revealed the carefully timed nature of his business failure. Walter took residence in the Aspen cabin, furnished with framed copies of planning commission votes that benefited Baxter Development, alongside financial analyses showing the subsequent property value increases. The children were given the most normal accommodations in Spruce Cabin, though their phones mysteriously stopped working as soon as they crossed the property line, replaced by restricted devices that only allowed communication within the lodge network. As the guests settled in, Mira monitored their reactions from the control room hidden beneath the main lodge. Psychological distress indicators are presenting in all adult subjects, she reported to Liam. Elevated heart rates, increased perspiration, anxiety responses. And the surveillance systems? Fully operational in all cabins. Audio and video feeds are clear. Begin Phase 1 environmental adjustments, Liam instructed. Subtle variations only. Throughout the cabins, nearly imperceptible changes began to take effect. In Diana and Roland's cabin, the temperature fluctuated by 2 degrees in random intervals. In Oscar's space, the lighting dimmed and brightened unpredictably. Walter's cabin featured occasional, barely audible recordings of his most damning planning commission statements. At precisely 7 o'clock, the guests gathered in the main lodge's dining room. The table was set impeccably, with Liam at the head and place cards directing each person to specific seats, strategically positioning Diana directly across from him. "I've taken the liberty of planning the menu," Liam announced as the first course was served. "Each dish represents a location where I worked during my 7 years abroad." The appetizer, a spiced lamb dish, arrived with Liam's casual narration. "This represents Afghanistan, my first overseas post. 18-hour days rebuilding infrastructure destroyed by Taliban forces. I slept in a shipping container that reached 110 degrees during summer days." Diana picked at her food uncomfortably. "Liam, perhaps we should discuss why we're all here." "All in good time," he replied pleasantly. "We have 3 days together. No need to rush." As the main course arrived, a North African fish preparation, Liam continued his travelogue. "This dish comes from my time in Libya. Our compound was attacked 3 times during my stay. During the second attack, I took shrapnel in my left shoulder. The medical facilities were rudimentary." He rolled up his sleeve to reveal a jagged scar. "I was back at work within 48 hours. The project couldn't afford delays." Cooper, who had remained silent until now, suddenly asked, "Did you really get hurt working?" "Many times," Liam answered, meeting his son's eyes directly. "The danger was why the pay was so high, why I could afford to send so much money home." "Mom said you left because you didn't want a family anymore," Audrey interjected. "That you chose money over us." A heavy silence fell over the table. "Is that what you believed?" Liam asked quietly. "It's what we were told," Cooper replied defensively. Liam nodded thoughtfully. "Tomorrow, I'll show you evidence of what actually happened. Tonight, let's simply enjoy our meal." As dessert was served, Roland attempted to assert control. "This property must have cost a fortune. Part of your hidden assets, I presume." "The very ones you've been trying to access through Diana," Liam confirmed pleasantly. "Tomorrow morning at 9, we'll begin our business discussions. I recommend everyone gets a good night's rest." After dinner, the guests retired to their cabins, unsettled by Liam's calm demeanor and cryptic statements. What none realized was that their first night at Lakeview Lodge had been designed as merely an introduction to what awaited them. In the control room, Liam watched the cabin feeds as his guests prepared for bed. "Increase environmental adjustments by 15%, he instructed Mira, and initiate first phase isolation." Throughout the property, subtle changes took effect. Cell service, already weak, disappeared entirely. Internet connections failed. The property's landline telephones registered as functional but routed all calls to Liam's team. By midnight, Lakeview Lodge was completely cut off from the outside world, its occupants unaware that they had entered a psychologically engineered environment from which there would be no easy escape. Damon joined Liam at the monitoring station. "They're all asleep except Diana. She's still trying to get her phone to work." "She won't succeed," Liam replied, watching her frustrated attempts. "By morning, they'll realize communication is impossible. That's when the real work begins. Are you sure about this approach?" Damon asked carefully. There are simpler ways to exact revenge. Liam's expression hardened. I spent 7 years in hell to provide for these people. They spent those same years betraying me, stealing from me, and erasing me from existence. There's nothing simple about what they deserve. He turned back to the monitors, watching Diana finally give up on her phone and climb into bed beside Roland. Tomorrow, Liam promised quietly, they learn what it means to be truly abandoned. Chapter 7. Sins Exposed. Morning at Lakeview Lodge arrived with seemingly perfect tranquility. Sunlight sparkling on the lake, the scent of pine filling the crisp mountain air, breakfast laid out in the main lodge's dining room. Yet beneath this serene surface, anxiety had taken root among the guests. My phone still isn't working, Diana complained, joining the others at the breakfast table. And neither is the cabin's internet connection. Same with ours, Audrey confirmed, looking up from her useless device. Roland frowned. It's a remote location. Connectivity issues aren't surprising. The landline's working, Liam noted casually, sipping his coffee. Though only for emergency calls. We are rather isolated here. Oscar studied his brother suspiciously. Convenient isolation. Privacy, Liam corrected. For our discussions. After breakfast, Liam led the group to the lodge's conference room, a wood-paneled space with a large table and a projection screen on one wall. As everyone took their seats, Brandon distributed folders to each adult guest. Before we begin, Liam announced, I want to establish a framework for our discussions. Each of you has made choices regarding me and my absence. Today, we'll examine those choices with complete transparency. He activated the projection system, displaying a timeline beginning 7 years earlier with his departure for overseas work. Let's start with the financial arrangements, Liam continued. During my absence, I sent home approximately $12 million in salary and bonuses. Diana had access to our joint accounts, from which she withdrew $4.3 million over 7 years. Diana shifted uncomfortably. I needed to support the family. Indeed, Liam agreed. However, the children's expenses, including private school tuition, extracurricular activities, and health care, totaled less than $1 million during that period. The household expenses, including the mortgage I paid off before leaving, couldn't have exceeded another $1 million. He advanced to the next slide, showing a complex diagram of financial transfers. This leaves approximately $2.3 million that moved through a series of shell companies before being invested in Baxter Development Group ventures. Roland intervened. Diana was entitled to invest marital assets as she saw fit. In her husband's business competitor, while still married to me, Liam countered. That's an interesting legal position. Walter cleared his throat. I advised her on those investments. They appeared sound, especially with insider information about upcoming zoning changes, Liam added, displaying planning commission documents with Walter's signature. Convenient how Baxter Properties received variances just before the light rail announcement. The color drained from Walter's face. Liam turned his attention to Oscar. Then there's my brother, accepting $8,000 monthly support payments from me, while simultaneously working for Roland and helping secure those same zoning variances. I needed income during my bankruptcy, Oscar protested weakly. The bankruptcy you filed the same month you started working for Roland, Liam noted. Quite a coincidence. For the next 2 hours, Liam methodically presented evidence of each betrayal, from Diana's systematic draining of accounts to Roland's strategic exploitation of her access to funds, from Oscar's duplicitous financial dealings to Walter's abuse of his planning commission position. Most devastating were the recorded conversations between various combinations of adults, plotting how to prevent Liam from ever reclaiming his place in the family. Throughout this presentation, Audrey and Cooper sat in stunned silence, witnessing the adults they trusted being exposed as manipulative conspirators. Mom, Audrey finally said, her voice shaking, you told us Dad abandoned us for money. Diana couldn't meet her daughter's eyes. It was complicated, honey. Was it complicated when you coached us to pretend we didn't recognize him? Cooper demanded, his adolescent face flushing with anger. Those text messages you sent us before he came home, Those weren't complicated. They were lies. Liam allowed this family confrontation to unfold without intervention, watching as the carefully constructed narrative Diana had built began to crumble under the weight of evidence. "I think," he finally said, "we should take a break. Lunch will be served on the terrace in 30 minutes. This afternoon, we'll discuss consequences." As the group dispersed, shaken by the morning's revelations, Liam returned to the control room where Mira awaited with updates. "Psychological stress indicators are elevated in all adult subjects," she reported. "Diana's particularly high. Pulse rate hasn't dropped below 100 since the financial evidence was presented. And Roland, attempting to make calls whenever he's alone. He's tried reaching his lawyer 6 times in the past hour." Liam nodded in satisfaction. "Increase cabin environmental adjustments to Phase 2. I want them unsettled but functional." During lunch, the group maintained an uneasy silence, broken only by occasional attempts at small talk from Oscar. The children sat apart from the adults, whispering among themselves and casting accusing glances at their mother. Roland finally addressed Liam directly. "What's your endgame here? Money? You've clearly protected most of your assets. Humiliation? You've achieved that already. What more do you want?" Liam considered the question thoughtfully. "Justice," he eventually replied. "Proportional response to deliberate harm." "We're talking about a divorce and some poor communication," Roland protested. "Not capital crimes." "Are we?" Liam's voice remained calm. "You systematically erased a man's existence. You stole his identity as husband and father. You rewrote history to villainize him while profiting from his sacrifice. If that happened to you, what would you consider appropriate consequences?" Before Roland could respond, Brandon approached to whisper something in Liam's ear. "It seems we have an unexpected development," Liam announced. "Roland has been attempting to arrange outside intervention. As a result, we'll accelerate our afternoon schedule." He stood, gesturing toward the main lodge. "Everyone inside, please. It's time for individual accountability." The group was led back to the conference room, where the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The lights were dimmer, and the room's temperature had dropped several degrees. On the table before each adult seat lay a single item related to their particular betrayal. Before Diana, printed transcripts of her conversations with Roland, mocking Liam's absence while planning how to access his remaining assets. Before Roland, financial documents revealing how his failing business had been propped up by money stolen from Liam. Before Oscar, bank statements showing support payments from Liam deposited the same days he received commission payments from Roland for securing zoning variances. Before Walter, planning commission votes alongside property purchases by Baxter Development, demonstrating the pattern of insider trading. "Each of you," Liam began, "has a choice to make. Behind your folders are legal documents. Signing them represents accountability and resolution. Refusing means consequences." Diana opened her folder first. "This is insane. You want me to sign over all remaining marital assets and publicly admit to financial fraud?" "I want you to acknowledge what you did," Liam corrected. "The financial arrangements are secondary." Roland examined his documents next. "This would bankrupt me. You're demanding repayment of all funds invested in my company through Diana, plus punitive damages. Funds stolen from me," Liam noted. "With interest." Oscar and Walter found similar agreements tailored to their specific betrayals. Oscar required to repay all support payments with interest, Walter to resign from the Planning Commission and admit his ethical violations. "And if we refuse?" Walter demanded. In response, Liam activated the projection system again. This time, it displayed a comprehensive evidence package prepared for federal prosecutors, detailing conspiracy, fraud, insider trading, and misappropriation of funds. "This information goes to the FBI, SEC, and District Attorney tomorrow morning unless all documents are signed," Liam explained. "I've already provided a preliminary report that's triggered an investigation into the light rail property purchases. This evidence would conclusively link all of you to the conspiracy." "You destroy your children's mother?" Diana challenged. "You destroyed their father," Liam countered without hesitation. "They deserve to know what kind of people raised them." As the adults argued and negotiated, Audrey suddenly stood. "We want to talk to our father," she announced, indicating herself and Cooper. "Alone?" Liam nodded, leading the teenagers to a small study adjacent to the conference room. Once inside, Cooper immediately confronted him. "Did you really send all that money home for us?" "Every month," Liam confirmed, along with letters, emails, and video calls that became increasingly one-sided over time. Audrey's eyes filled with tears. "Mom said you stopped calling because you didn't care anymore." "I never stopped," Liam said quietly. "Eventually, Diana stopped putting you on the calls. Then she stopped taking them altogether." "Why didn't you just come home?" Cooper demanded. "The contract had severe penalties for early termination," Liam explained. "And the final 2 years paid triple the annual salary, money I intended for your college funds." He opened a laptop, accessing files that showed years of communication attempts, financial transfers earmarked for the children's future, and video messages that had never been shared with them. "I'm not blameless," Liam admitted. "I chose distance to provide security. I trusted your mother to maintain our family while I was away. Both were mistakes I'll always regret." Audrey studied him with new awareness. "What happens to Mom if she doesn't sign your papers?" "She faces potential federal charges, along with Roland, your grandfather, and Uncle Oscar." "And what happens to us?" Cooper asked, his young face showing the strain of these revelations. For the first time, Liam's composed facade cracked slightly. "That depends partly on your choices. You're approaching adulthood. You have agency in determining your path forward. Would you want us in your life?" Audrey asked directly. "After we pretended not to know you?" Liam considered his answer carefully. "You were manipulated by adults you trusted. That doesn't erase the hurt, but contextualizes your actions. We could establish a relationship if you wanted that." The siblings exchanged glances, communicating silently in the way only close siblings can. "We need time to think," Cooper finally said. "Take all the time you need," Liam replied. "My door remains open." As they returned to the conference room, they found Diana, Roland, Oscar, and Walter in intense discussion, calculating their limited options. The atmosphere was tense with the recognition that Liam had executed a nearly perfect trap. "We'll need our own legal counsel before signing anything," Roland insisted. "Of course," Liam agreed reasonably. "You're welcome to consult attorneys tomorrow when communication with the outside world resumes. Tonight, you'll have time to consider your positions." He checked his watch. "Dinner will be served at 7. Until then, you're free to enjoy the property. Though I advise staying within the perimeter, the surrounding forest can be treacherous for those unfamiliar with the terrain." As the group dispersed, Liam returned to the control room where his team awaited. "They'll try to leave," Damon predicted. Roland and Oscar already attempted to reach the access road, Mira confirmed, monitoring the property surveillance. They turned back when they realized how dense the forest becomes. Liam nodded, unsurprised. They'll spend the afternoon searching for ways to escape or communicate. By dinner, they'll understand there are none. "Is that ethical?" Colin questioned hesitantly. "Is what they did to me ethical?" Liam countered. "They've had years of freedom while benefiting from my sacrifice. They can endure one night of isolation while contemplating their actions." As predicted, the afternoon saw various escape attempts by the adults. Roland and Oscar tried navigating to the main road, but became disoriented in the woods. Walter attempted to signal passing boats on the lake, only to discover the property's shoreline was designed to be invisible from the water. Diana searched desperately for communication devices, finding none that functioned. Only the children remained in their cabin, processing the day's revelations and discussing their options. By dinner time, a storm had moved across the lake, adding nature's fury to the psychological pressure building within Lakeview Lodge. As lightning flashed and thunder rolled, Liam's guests gathered one final time, their faces showing the strain of recognition that they were truly trapped until Liam decided otherwise. The stage was set for the final act of Liam Knox's meticulously orchestrated revenge. Chapter 8: The Sentence. Dinner that evening was served amid the storm's fury, rain lashing against the lodge's windows while thunder punctuated the tense silence around the table. The elaborate meal went largely untouched as each guest contemplated their precarious position. "I think we've reached the point of decision," Liam announced as dessert was cleared away. "By morning, I'll need your answers regarding the agreements." "This is a legal detention," Roland argued, though his confident tone had faded considerably since their arrival. "Is it?" Liam countered. "You all came voluntarily. The property is isolated, certainly, but the doors remain unlocked. You're free to leave, though navigating miles of forest during a storm would be inadvisable." Diana, who had remained quiet through most of dinner, finally spoke. "What happens if we sign? What guarantee do we have that you won't send the evidence to authorities anyway?" "You have my word," Liam replied simply. Oscar laughed bitterly. "Your word? After all this elaborate revenge plotting, you expect us to trust your word?" "I spent 7 years honoring my commitments under the most dangerous conditions imaginable," Liam stated, his voice hardening. "I said I would provide for my family, and I did, beyond what most men could offer. Every promise I made, I kept." He looked around the table, meeting each adult's eyes in turn. "Which of you can say the same?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "You have until breakfast to decide," Liam concluded, standing from the table. "Choose wisely." As the group dispersed for what promised to be a sleepless night, Liam intercepted Audrey and Cooper. "A moment, please." He led them to his private study, a warm space filled with books and a crackling fire that offered refuge from the storm outside. "I wanted to give you these," he said, handing each teenager a small flash drive. "They contain videos and messages I sent over the years. Things your mother never shared with you." Cooper turned the drive over in his hand. "Why now?" "Because regardless of what happens tomorrow, you deserve the truth," Liam answered. "Not my version or your mother's version, but the objective reality of what transpired." "And what about us?" Audrey asked. "Are we part of your revenge plan too?" Liam's expression softened. "No, you're both victims of the adults' choices, mine included. The agreements I've prepared include provisions for your future, regardless of your relationship with me." "What kind of provisions?" Cooper asked suspiciously. "College funds, independent of Diana or Roland's finances. Housing allowances when you're ready. Career mentorship if you want it." Liam paused. "No strings attached. No obligation to maintain contact with me if that's not what you want." Audrey studied him carefully. "Why would you do that after how we treated you?" "Because that's what a father does," Liam answered simply. "Protects his children's future, even when it's difficult, even when it hurts." For the first time since his return, tears formed in Liam's eyes, quickly blinked away, but noticed by both teenagers. "Get some rest," he said, composing himself. "Tomorrow will be challenging for everyone." Throughout the night, Liam's team monitored the cabins, tracking each occupant's activities. Diana and Roland argued bitterly, blame shifting between them as they recognized the inevitability of their defeat. Oscar attempted to draft alternative proposals, searching desperately for leverage that didn't exist. Walter made peace with his fate, recognizing that his reputation, the thing he valued most, was already compromised. Only the children slept soundly, unburdened by the guilty consciences that plagued the adults. Morning arrived with clear skies and calm waters, the storm having passed both literally and metaphorically. As breakfast was served, Liam noted the resigned expressions on the adults' faces. "Your decisions?" he inquired after coffee had been poured. One by one, they capitulated. Diana signed the agreement, surrendering all claims to Liam's assets and acknowledging her financial misdeeds. Roland committed to repaying the misappropriated funds, effectively bankrupting his over-leveraged business. Oscar accepted responsibility for his duplicity and the required restitution. Walter agreed to resign from the Planning Commission with a statement acknowledging ethical violations. "Wise choices," Liam commented, collecting the signed documents. "Brandon will return your phones and restore communications. Vehicles are waiting to transport you to the airport whenever you're ready to depart." "That's it?" Diana asked incredulously. "After all this, we just leave?" "What did you expect?" Liam inquired. "Physical retribution? Prolonged suffering?" "I'm not a monster, Diana. I simply wanted accountability." Roland, never one to accept defeat gracefully, attempted one final assertion of control. You've had your victory, Knox. But remember, you've been gone 7 years. We've been raising your children. That bond doesn't disappear because of some paperwork and dramatic revelations. Liam's expression remained neutral. You're right. Which is why the final decision remains with Audrey and Cooper. He turned to his children. You've heard and seen everything. You've had time to consider your options. The choice of where and with whom you live going forward is yours alone. Diana's confidence faltered. They're minors. Legally, I've prepared emancipation documents for both. Should they choose that path, Liam interrupted. The family court judge who reviewed the evidence of your manipulation was quite sympathetic to granting them decision-making authority. All eyes turned to the teenagers, who exchanged a silent glance before Audrey spoke for both. We need time, she said firmly, away from all of you, to sort through what's real and what isn't. Cooper nodded in agreement. We're going to stay with Grandma Jenkins for a while. Diana's mother, who had never approved of how her daughter had handled the separation, had evidently offered a neutral sanctuary. Liam accepted this with dignity. A wise decision. Take all the time you need. Within 2 hours, the property began to empty. Diana and Roland departed first, stone-faced and separate, their relationship already fracturing under the strain of mutual recrimination. Oscar and Walter followed shortly after, both avoiding eye contact with Liam as they entered their respective vehicles. The children were the last to leave, pausing to speak with Liam privately before their departure. Will you still be here? Cooper asked hesitantly. When we're ready to talk. I'll be wherever you need me to be, Liam promised. On your timeline, not mine. After they left, Liam stood on the lodge's deck overlooking the lake, experiencing not the satisfaction he had anticipated, but a complex mixture of vindication and loss. Mira joined him, the team's work now complete. Was it worth it? She asked. Liam considered the question carefully. They've been held accountable. They'll face consequences proportionate to their actions. The children know the truth. That doesn't answer my question, she noted. No, Liam admitted. It doesn't. The truth was more complicated than simple revenge could address. 7 years couldn't be reclaimed. Trust, once shattered, left permanent fractures even when repaired. The fantasy of a restored family had died the moment he'd seen the lack of recognition in his children's eyes. What remained was the future, uncertain but honest, built on truth rather than comforting lies. Have the property prepared for sale, Liam instructed Bernard when he called later that day. Its purpose has been served. Chapter 9. Ashes and Rebirth. 6 months passed before Liam Knox returned to Milwaukee. He had spent the interim traveling, not to conflict zones this time, but to places of personal significance. His childhood hometown in Oregon, the base in North Carolina where he'd first met Bernard during their Marine service, the small Caribbean island where he'd once promised himself he'd retire when his work was done. Through it all, he maintained minimal contact with the world he'd left behind. Bernard provided occasional updates on the consequences unfolding in his absence. Diana and Roland had separated, their relationship unable to withstand the financial collapse of Baxter Development and the public humiliation that followed. Roland had declared bankruptcy, his investors abandoning him after learning of his unethical financing methods. Oscar had sold his home to repay Liam and moved to Arizona, seeking a fresh start away from the reputation he'd earned. Walter had resigned from the Planning Commission amid a quiet ethics investigation, his standing in the community permanently diminished. The children had remained with Diana's mother, attending therapy and rebuilding their sense of reality after years of manipulation. They occasionally sent brief messages to Liam, not ready for direct contact, but maintaining a tenuous connection. When Liam finally returned to Milwaukee, it was to a luxury apartment downtown. Not the penthouse command center, but a simpler space overlooking the river. His revenge completed, he had no need for elaborate surveillance or strategic positioning. His first visitor was Bernard, arriving with the final accounting of Liam's financial empire, now secured against further attempts at misappropriation. You could retire comfortably, Bernard noted, reviewing the figures. Never work another day if you didn't want to. Liam shook his head. Idleness doesn't suit me. Then what's next? The question lingered between them, the true purpose of Liam's return still unspoken. "I've been offered a position with the International Infrastructure Coalition," Liam finally revealed, "overseeing rebuilding projects in regions recovering from natural disasters." Bernard raised an eyebrow. "Back to dangerous locations?" "Challenging ones," Liam corrected, "but with better accommodations than shipping containers." Before Bernard could respond, Liam's phone chimed with a message. He checked it, his expression revealing nothing. "Audrey and Cooper," he explained. "They want to meet." The following day, Liam sat at a quiet table in a neutral location, a bookstore cafe chosen by the teenagers. When they arrived, he was struck by how much they'd changed in 6 months. Both stood taller, their faces showing the maturity that comes from confronting difficult truths. "Thank you for coming," Liam greeted them, restraining the urge to embrace children who were still essentially strangers. "We've been watching the videos you gave us," Audrey began once they were seated, "and reading the letters." "There were so many," Cooper added quietly. "Mom said you only sent a few." Liam nodded, unsurprised. "What matters is that you have them now." For nearly 2 hours, they talked, tentatively at first, then with increasing openness. The teenagers shared their experiences since Lake Tahoe, the therapy that was helping them process years of manipulation, their cautious reconnection with Diana under their grandmother's watchful supervision. "Mom's different now," Audrey explained, "without Roland's influence. She's more like we remember from when we were little. Grandma makes her take responsibility," Cooper added with a hint of satisfaction. "No more lying." Liam listened without judgment, recognizing the children's need to rebuild a relationship with their mother despite her betrayal. "People can change when properly motivated," he acknowledged. As their conversation wound down, Cooper finally asked the question that had clearly been weighing on both teenagers' minds. "Are you staying in Milwaukee?" "My new position begins in 3 weeks," Liam explained. "It will involve international travel, but not like before. Shorter projects, regular returns to a home base." "Here," Audrey pressed. Liam studied his children carefully. "That depends partly on you. There's nothing keeping me in Milwaukee except the possibility of knowing you both." The siblings exchanged one of their communicative glances before Cooper responded. "We'd like that. To try at least. Then I'll establish my base here," Liam promised. "On your timeline, not mine." As they prepared to leave, Audrey hesitated before asking one final question. "Do you hate Mom for what she did?" Liam considered this carefully. "Hate requires continued investment in someone else's significance. Diana no longer holds that place in my life." "That's not really an answer," Cooper observed with surprising insight. "No," Liam acknowledged with a small smile. "It's not." The truth was more nuanced than he could express to his children. He didn't hate Diana. Hatred would imply ongoing emotional engagement. What he felt was something colder and more final, the complete excision of someone who had once been central to his existence. In the weeks that followed, Liam established a new rhythm to his life. He prepared for his upcoming position while creating space in his schedule for regular contact with Audrey and Cooper. They began with supervised visits, gradually progressing to day trips and eventually weekends at his apartment. Diana remained peripheral to this developing relationship, not directly oppositional, but maintaining cautious distance. The divorce settlement had left her financially secure but humbled, her social standing diminished by the revelations about her conduct. 2 days before Liam was scheduled to depart for his first international assignment, he received an unexpected visitor. Diana stood at his apartment door, her appearance markedly different from their last encounter. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect styling, replaced by simpler attire and a face that showed the strain of recent months. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its former confidence. Liam stepped aside wordlessly, allowing her entry but not offering refreshment. The gesture was clear. She was permitted presence but not hospitality. "The children tell me you're leaving again," Diana began, standing awkwardly in his minimalist living room. A 2-week assessment in the Philippines, Liam confirmed, followed by regular returns to Milwaukee. Diana nodded, seemingly relieved. "That's good. For them. Why are you here, Diana?" She took a deep breath. to acknowledge what I did. Properly. Not under coercion or threat, but voluntarily. I don't need your acknowledgement, Liam replied coldly. The legal documents covered everything necessary. This isn't for you, Diana countered with unexpected directness. It's for me. My therapist says I can't move forward without taking full. For several minutes, she spoke without interruption, detailing her gradual slide from lonely wife to active conspirator, her initial rationalization that the children needed stability more than distant financial support, her eventual embrace of the freedom and wealth Liam's absence provided without the inconvenience of his participation. I rewrote our history to justify my choices, she concluded. Then I taught that false narrative to our children until they believed it completely. Throughout this confession, Liam's expression remained impassive. When Diana finally fell silent, he asked simply, "Is that all?" His coldness seemed to wound her more than anger would have. "You'll never forgive me, will you?" "No," Liam confirmed without hesitation. "Forgiveness implies a continued relationship. Ours ended the moment you taught our children I was nobody." Diana flinched but didn't disagree. "What about the children? How do we co-parent from this position?" "We don't," Liam stated flatly. "They're old enough to navigate relationships with each of us individually. I won't interfere with their connection to you unless you attempt to manipulate them again. And if I do," Liam's smile was chilling in its certainty, "then you'll discover that Lake Tahoe was merely a demonstration of my capabilities, not their limit." After Diana left, Liam stood at his window overlooking the river, reflecting on the symmetry of life cycles. 7 years ago, he had departed Milwaukee with absolute certainty that he was securing his family's future through sacrifice. Now he prepared to leave again, but with clearer vision about the nature of loyalty and betrayal. His phone chimed with a message from Cooper, confirming plans to see him off at the airport in 2 days. Another message followed from Audrey, sharing her latest college application essay for his feedback. These simple communications, trivial to most parents, represented a victory more meaningful than all the calculated revenge of Lake Tahoe. His children were choosing to rebuild a relationship with him, one honest interaction at a time. Liam Knox had returned from 7 years overseas to discover complete betrayal. He had engineered meticulous consequences for those who had wronged him. But in the ashes of his former life, something unexpected had emerged. The possibility of authentic connection unburdened by illusion. He would never forgive those who had betrayed him. That capacity had been burned away during long nights in shipping containers and dangerous days in conflict zones. But he had found something more valuable than forgiveness, the ability to build a future unencumbered by the weight of false expectations. As night fell over the city, Liam began packing for his upcoming trip, placing a framed photo of Audrey and Cooper on his bedside table. Not the outdated image he'd carried overseas for 7 years, but a recent picture from their first unsupervised weekend together. In it, their smiles were tentative but genuine, their eyes clear with the relief of finally living in truth. That, he decided, was the most effective revenge of all. Not the destruction of those who had wronged him, but the reclamation of what truly mattered from the wreckage they had created. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Salvatore Garner had always believed that success was earned through discipline, strategy, and unwavering determination. At 42, he embodied those principles. Standing 6 feet tall with steel gray eyes that missed nothing, Sal had built Garner Security Solutions from the ground up, transforming it from a one-man operation into the most trusted private security firm in Chicago. His reputation was built on 2 things: protecting his clients at all costs and never backing down from a fight. The mahogany-paneled office on the 34th floor of the Prudential Building reflected his journey. Awards lined the walls alongside photos with politicians, celebrities, and corporate executives whose lives he'd safeguarded. But the centerpiece wasn't a business accolade. It was a framed photo of his 18-year-old son, Matthew Garner, in his Westfield Academy graduation gown, that brilliant smile that could light up any room. "Dad, you worry too much," Matthew had said just 3 weeks ago, laughing as Sal reviewed his college security protocols for Northwestern University. "I'm not some senator's kid who needs bodyguards. I can take care of myself." But Sal's protective instincts ran deeper than professional habit. Matthew was his legacy, his pride, the one pure thing in a world that had shown Sal every shade of darkness. Raised by his wife Nicole Garner, a former federal prosecutor turned law professor, Matthew had inherited his mother's sharp intellect and his father's moral compass. Nicole, 40, still turned heads with her auburn hair and fierce green eyes, though those eyes had softened considerably since leaving the prosecutor's office 5 years ago. She'd seen enough corruption, enough plea deals that let monsters walk free, enough victims denied justice. Teaching law at DePaul University allowed her to shape the next generation of attorneys while maintaining her sanity. The Garner household had always been a sanctuary of intellectual debate and moral clarity. Dinner conversations ranged from constitutional law to security protocols, with Matthew holding his own against two formidable minds. He was planning to study journalism at Northwestern, driven by an idealistic belief that truth and transparency could change the world. Someone has to hold people accountable, Matthew had argued during their last family dinner. Too many people with power think they're untouchable. Sal had smiled at his son's passion, recognizing his younger self in those words. Before building his security empire, Sal had spent 8 years as a Chicago police detective, specializing in organized crime. He learned that the most dangerous enemies weren't the obvious criminals. They were the ones who wore suits, shook hands, and smiled while destroying lives from positions of trust. That insight had made him wealthy. Garner Security Solutions didn't just provide bodyguards. They offered comprehensive threat assessment, background investigations, and strategic security planning. Sal's client list read like a who's who of Chicago's elite. CEOs, judges, politicians, and old money families who understood that true power required protection. But with success came enemies. Sal had disrupted more than one criminal enterprise, exposed corporate espionage, and sent several prominent figures to prison through his investigations. He maintained detailed files on potential threats, updated security protocols quarterly, and never let his guard down completely, which made what happened next all the more devastating. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Sal was reviewing security footage from a client's warehouse when his phone buzzed. Nicole stirred beside him in bed, her professor's instinct always alert for late-night emergencies. "Mr. Garner, this is Officer Diana Carver with the Chicago Police Department. I need to inform you about your son, Matthew." The world tilted. Sal's hand tightened on the phone as every worst-case scenario he'd ever imagined flashed through his mind. Kidnapping, revenge against his family, a client's enemy targeting his weakness. What happened? His voice remained steady, the professional mask intact even as his heart hammered. "There's been an accident on Lakeshore Drive. I need you and your wife to come to Northwestern Memorial Hospital immediately." The 20-minute drive passed in crystalline clarity. Sal noticed every streetlight, every late-night pedestrian, every detail his mind could catalog to avoid thinking about the unthinkable. Nicole gripped his hand, her prosecutor's composure cracking only in the tremor of her fingers. They prepared for many threats over the years. Home invasion, kidnapping, corporate espionage targeting their family. They'd installed the best security systems money could buy, varied their routines, and taught Matthew situational awareness for childhood. But they'd never prepared for this. Chapter 2. The Unthinkable. Northwestern Memorial's trauma center smelled of antiseptic and desperation. The fluorescent lights cast everything in harsh, unforgiving white as Sal and Nicole hurried through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Officer Diana Carver, A composed woman in her 30s with kind eyes that had seen too much met them at the trauma bay entrance. "Mr. and Mrs. Garner, I'm very sorry for your loss." The words hit like physical blows. Nicole's knees buckled, and Sal caught her, his own world fragmenting even as his body moved on autopilot. "Loss. Past tense. Final. I need to see him," Nicole whispered, her voice hollow. The next hour blurred together in a nightmare of official procedures and devastating details. Matthew had been driving north on Lakeshore Drive around 11:15 p.m. when his BMW had veered off the road near the Oak Street curve, striking the concrete barrier at 70 miles per hour. The impact had been catastrophic. He was alone in the vehicle. Officer Carver explained gently. No other cars were involved. Preliminary investigation suggests he lost control on the curve. Sal's detective instincts kicked in even through the grief. Weather conditions? Clear skies, dry road. No evidence of mechanical failure. We'll know more after the full investigation. They were led to a small family room where Matthew lay on a gurney, covered by a white sheet. Nicole collapsed beside their son, her anguished cries echoing off the sterile walls. Sal stood frozen, staring at the face that had been animated with laughter just hours ago at dinner. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Matthew had been accepted to Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism. Full scholarship, the world spread out before him like a map of infinite possibilities. He'd been excited about his first investigative journalism class, already planning exposé pieces on campus corruption and city politics. "We found his personal effects at the scene," Officer Carver said quietly, handing Sal a plastic evidence bag. His wallet, keys, and cell phone. The phone was recovered about 15 feet from the vehicle. Through his grief, Sal registered an important detail. The phone screen was cracked but still functional. Matthew's last text conversation was visible. Messages with his best friend, Zachary Woodard, from earlier that evening. Matthew 10 verse 47 p.m. "Something's not right, man. I think I'm being watched." Zachary, 10:48 p.m. "Paranoid much? You've been watching too much true crime with your dad." Matthew 10 verse 52 p.m. "I'm serious. Same car has been behind me for 20 minutes. Different routes." Zachary 10:54 p.m. "Where are you now?" Matthew 11:08 p.m. "If you're reading this, tell my dad to check the CCTV I put in my room." Sal's blood turned to ice. Matthew had installed surveillance in his own room. His son had felt threatened enough to take precautions, and Sal had missed the signs completely. The final timestamp was 11:11 p.m., 6 minutes before the estimated time of the crash. "Officer Carver," Sal said, his voice cutting through Nicole's sobs. "I need you to treat this as more than an accident. My son was being followed." The officer's expression shifted, professional interest replacing routine sympathy. "What makes you say that?" Sal showed her the text messages. "My son doesn't panic. He doesn't imagine threats. If he said he was being watched, then someone was watching him. And this message about CCTV." He trailed off, mind racing. "I need to get home. Now." "Sir, I understand you're looking for answers, but grief can make us." "I'm not some bereaved parent grasping at conspiracy theories," Sal interrupted, his voice gaining the edge that had intimidated countless suspects. "I'm a former Chicago detective who runs the largest private security firm in the city. My son was murdered, and the evidence is in my house." Officer Carver studied him for a long moment, recognizing the steel beneath the grief. "I'll follow you home. If there's evidence of foul play, we'll pursue it." The drive back to their Lincoln Park brownstone took an eternity. Sal's mind cataloged every case he'd worked, every enemy he'd made, everyone who might want to hurt his family. The list was longer than he cared to admit. Nicole rode in silence, clutching Matthew's phone like a lifeline. The reality hadn't fully hit her yet. Sal recognized the signs of shock from his police days. The real grief would come later, in waves that would nearly drown them both. But first, he had to know the truth. Chapter 3. The Discovery. The Garner brownstone stood like a fortress on North Cleveland Avenue, its 3 stories of red brick and limestone facade concealing the most advanced residential security system in Chicago. Motion sensors, camera networks, reinforced entry points, and a safe room that could withstand a small siege, all designed by a man who understood that enemies came in many forms. Sal disabled the alarm system with trembling fingers, muscle memory guiding him through the familiar routine while his mind reeled with possibilities. Officer Carver followed, her hand resting unconsciously on her service weapon as she surveyed the sophisticated security setup. "Impressive system," she observed. "Your son grew up understanding operational security, which makes his behavior tonight even more significant," Sal replied, leading them upstairs to Matthew's room. He wouldn't have panicked without cause. Matthew's room occupied the entire third floor, converted from the original servants' quarters into a teenager's sanctuary. Vintage journalism posters lined the walls. Woodward and Bernstein, Edward R. Murrow, Ida B. Wells, alongside modern tech equipment that would make most college students jealous. A standing desk held dual monitors, professional-grade cameras, and editing equipment for Matthew's documentary projects. But Sal's attention focused on a small device mounted discreetly in the corner near the ceiling. It looked like a standard smoke detector, but he recognized the telltale lens of a high-end surveillance camera. When did he install this? Sal muttered, pulling out his phone to access the camera's wireless feed. And why didn't he tell us? The camera was connected to a hidden server tucked behind Matthew's bookshelf. Professional-grade equipment, not some teen spy toy. Sal felt a mixture of pride and concern. His son had inherited more than just moral conviction. Officer Carver watched as Sal navigated the digital interface. "How long has this been recording?" "Based on the file sizes, looks like continuous recording for the past 2 weeks." Sal's frown deepened. This was planned, not paranoid impulse. The footage began 2 weeks ago, showing Matthew's normal routine, studying, video calls with friends, working on journalism projects. But on night 4, something changed. Matthew's behavior became furtive, checking his window frequently, taking calls in whispered tones. "There," Nicole said suddenly, her prosecutor's eye-catching details. Night 6. Look at his desk. The video showed Matthew researching something intensively, multiple browser windows open simultaneously. Legal documents, property records, financial filings, the kind of deep investigative work that had made Nicole's career. He was investigating someone, Officer Carver observed. This looks like case preparation. But the breakthrough came on night 10. Matthew was on his laptop when he suddenly froze, staring at something on his screen. He immediately grabbed his phone and made a call, pacing frantically. The audio was too distant to understand, but his body language screamed alarm. "Can we enhance the computer screen?" Nicole asked. See what he was looking at? Sal fast-forwarded through the remaining footage, watching his son's growing paranoia unfold. Matthew had started varying his sleep schedule, checking the windows obsessively, and most tellingly, he'd begun backing up files to multiple encrypted drives. Then came the final night, just hours ago, though it felt like years. The timestamp read 9:30 p.m. as Matthew entered his room, immediately moving to his desk. This time, the computer screen was angled toward the camera. What they saw made Sal's blood freeze. Matthew had been researching Kent Maddox, a prominent Chicago real estate developer and longtime family friend. But these weren't casual searches. Matthew had uncovered property fraud, illegal demolitions, and what appeared to be a systematic scheme to displace low-income residents through intimidation and violence. "Jesus Christ," Officer Carver whispered. "Your son found something big." The footage showed Matthew printing documents, filling a manila envelope, and hiding it in his closet. But at 10:15 p.m., his phone buzzed with a text that changed everything. They watched Matthew's face drain of color as he read the message. He immediately grabbed his keys and headed for the door, but not before looking directly into the camera and mouthing 3 words, "Find the truth." He knew he was in danger, Nicole said, her voice barely controlled. He knew, and he still left. Sal was already searching Matthew's closet, finding the hidden envelope behind his winter coats. Inside were printed emails, property records, and photographs documenting systematic corruption that reached into City Hall, the police department, and the construction industry. At the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note in Matthew's careful script. Dad, if you're reading this, then Kent Maddox figured out what I discovered. He's been destroying neighborhoods for profit, using violence and intimidation. The Riverside Gardens demolition wasn't legal. He forged the paperwork and bribed officials. 3 families died in those fires he set to clear the land. I have proof, but he has too many people in his pocket. Watch yourself. He's not the man we thought he was. Officer Carver read over Sal's shoulder, her expression grim. This is motive for murder. Kent Maddox, isn't he some big-shot developer? More than that, Sal said quietly, his grief transforming into something harder and more dangerous. He's my daughter's godfather, Nicole's law school study partner. He's been to every birthday party, every Christmas dinner. We trusted him with our family. The betrayal cut deeper than the grief. Kent Maddox hadn't just killed Matthew. He'd used 20 years of friendship to position himself for the perfect murder. He knew their routines, their security protocols, their blind spots. But he'd underestimated Salvatore Garner's capacity for revenge. Officer Carver, Sal said, his voice carrying the cold precision that had made him legendary in Chicago's criminal underworld. I need you to start an official investigation. Document everything we've found here. What about you? She asked, recognizing the shift in his demeanor. Sal was already mentally cataloging Kent Maddox's vulnerabilities, his business relationships, his security arrangements. The plan was forming, piece by piece, move by countermove. I'm going to do what the system can't, he said quietly. I'm going to get justice for my son. Chapter 4. The Investigation. The next 72 hours passed in a haze of funeral preparations and quiet investigation. To the outside world, Salvatore Garner was a grieving father making arrangements for his son's memorial service. In reality, he was methodically building a case for revenge that would have impressed his former colleagues at Chicago PD. Garner Security Solutions' downtown office became his war room. The conference table disappeared under photographs, financial records, property documents, and surveillance footage. Sal had activated every resource at his disposal. Private investigators, forensic accountants, and former law enforcement contacts who owed him favors. His lieutenant, Edgar Mora, a 20-year veteran of the Chicago PD before joining Garner Security, spread out the preliminary findings like a general planning a campaign. Kent Maddox is dirty as hell, but he's smart about it, Edgar reported. Shell companies, offshore accounts, layers of bureaucratic insulation. He's been running this property scheme for at least 5 years. Sal studied the organizational chart Edgar had constructed. Maddox Development sat at the center of a web connecting city planning commissioners, building inspectors, and key figures in the mayor's office. The Riverside Gardens project was just the tip of an iceberg that involved millions in fraudulent development deals. What about the families who died in those fires? Sal asked. 3 separate incidents over 6 months, Edgar continued. The Hernandez family, father, mother, 2 children. Maria Santos, elderly woman who refused to sell her house. And James Wheeler, disabled veteran who was organizing tenant resistance. Each name hit Sal like a physical blow. Matthew had died trying to expose a monster who'd been murdering innocent people while shaking hands at Christmas dinner. The fires were all ruled accidents or electrical problems, Edgar said. But look at this. He slid over a series of photographs showing similar burn patterns, identical accelerant residue, and the same cover-up techniques. This is the work of a professional arsonist. Nicole entered the conference room carrying coffee and wearing the expression she perfected during her prosecutor days. Controlled fury barely contained by legal discipline. I've been reviewing the official investigation, she announced. Kent has 3 aldermen and a district attorney on his payroll. The fix was in before Matthew even started asking questions. How do we prove it? Sal asked. We don't, Nicole replied, her green eyes flashing with dangerous intensity. Not through legal channels. Kent has too many people protecting him, and the evidence is circumstantial at best. Even if we could get him arrested, he'd be out on bail within hours. Sal nodded grimly. He'd expected as much. The system that had failed Matthew would fail them too. So we do this our way, he said quietly. Edgar leaned forward, recognizing the tone. During their police days, that particular inflection in Sal's voice had preceded some of their most unorthodox investigations, the kind that bent rules and crossed lines but always got results. "What are you thinking, boss?" Sal walked to the window, overlooking downtown Chicago. Kent Maddox's office building was visible 6 blocks away, its glass and steel facade glinting in the afternoon sun like a monument to corruption. "Kent thinks he's untouchable because he controls the system," Sal said. "Politicians, police, prosecutors, he's got everyone bought and paid for." But he made one critical mistake. "What's that?" Nicole asked. Sal turned back to face them, and Edgar recognized the expression from their old days hunting Chicago's worst predators. It was the look of a man who'd found his prey's weakness. "He forgot that I don't work for the system anymore. I am my own system." Over the next week, Sal put that system to work with surgical precision. His investigators documented Kent's entire operation: properties, shell companies, bank accounts, and a network of officials taking his bribes. They identified Kent's enforcers, his arsonist, and his money laundering operation. But more importantly, they identified his routine. Kent Maddox was a creature of habit, which made him predictable. Every Tuesday at 7 p.m., he met with his inner circle at Giuseppe's, an upscale Italian restaurant he owned through a shell company. The meetings took place in a private dining room with no security cameras and minimal witnesses, perfect for discussing illegal activities. "Security is light," reported Steve Lacey, one of Sal's best operatives. 2 bodyguards, both ex-cops who got kicked off the force for taking bribes. "They're lazy, overconfident, and not expecting trouble from someone like you." Sal studied the restaurant's floor plans, noting entrances, exits, and blind spots. Giuseppe's had been designed for privacy, which would work in his favor. "What about surveillance?" he asked. "Kent owns the building and controls the camera system. He turns off recording during his Tuesday meetings." "Perfect." Kent's paranoia about documenting his crimes would eliminate evidence of Sal's presence. "I need 2 weeks to set this up properly," Sal told Edgar. "I want everyone in Kent's organization identified and isolated. When I move against him, I don't want any loose ends coming back to hurt innocent people." But even as he planned, Sal felt the weight of what he was contemplating. Crossing this line would change everything. There would be no going back to his old life, no pretending he was just a security consultant who played by society's rules. Nicole found him that night in Matthew's room, staring at the surveillance footage of their son's final hours. "I know what you're planning," she said quietly, settling beside him on Matthew's bed. "The legal system failed him, Nicole. It's going to fail those other families, too. Someone has to hold Kent accountable." "I'm not trying to stop you," she said, surprising him. "I'm trying to help you do it right." She handed him a flash drive, bank records, communication intercepts, and witness statements from Kent's victims. Everything I could gather through back channels and old contacts. Sal looked at his wife, the former prosecutor who dedicated her career to justice through legal means, and saw the same cold determination that had made her legendary in Chicago's courtrooms. "Matthew got this from me," she continued. "That relentless pursuit of truth, that refusal to let powerful people escape consequences. If the courts won't give us justice, then we'll create our own." As they sat together in their dead son's room, surrounded by evidence of Kent Maddox's crimes, Sal felt the final pieces of his plan clicking into place. Kent had made this personal when he'd murdered Matthew. Now Sal would show him just how dangerous it was to threaten a Garner family member. The war was about to begin. Chapter 5. The Setup. Giuseppe's restaurant occupied the ground floor of a renovated warehouse in Chicago's River North District, its brick facade and warmly lit windows projecting an image of old-world authenticity. But Sal knew better as he studied the building from across the street, cataloging security measures and escape routes with the methodical precision of a professional predator. 2 weeks of surveillance had revealed Kent Maddox's patterns down to the minute. Every Tuesday at 7 p.m. sharp, Kent's black Mercedes would pull into the alley behind Giuseppe's. His 2 bodyguards, Dan Duke and Mitch Warren, both disgraced ex-cops who'd found lucrative employment in Kent's organization, would sweep the restaurant before allowing their boss inside. The private dining room on the second floor became Kent's war room for planning his next wave of property acquisitions. Maps of target neighborhoods, lists of stubborn tenants, and carefully coded discussions about encouraging people to relocate filled these sessions. Sal's investigation had identified Kent's entire inner circle. Jessica Hart, a corrupt city planning commissioner who rubber-stamped illegal demolition permits. Adam Massey, the arsonist responsible for the Riverside Gardens fires. And Sean Sparks, an alderman who blocked any investigations into Kent's activities. Each name now had a file in Sal's war room, complete with addresses, routines, weaknesses, and most importantly, the evidence needed to destroy their lives. But tonight was about Kent. Sal checked his watch, 6:45 p.m. In 15 minutes, Kent would arrive for his weekly strategy session. The other attendees would follow at 5-minute intervals, a security protocol designed to minimize exposure. By 7:30, they'd all be gathered in that soundproof private dining room, isolated from witnesses and surveillance. It was perfect. Sal's earpiece crackled with Edgar's voice from the surveillance van 3 blocks away. Targets are mobile. Kent's Mercedes just left his office building. Copy that, Sal replied, making final adjustments to his equipment. He wore the black tactical gear of his old SWAT days, modified with sound-dampening materials and enhanced body armor. The pistol at his hip was loaded with subsonic rounds that would barely whisper when fired. But the real weapon wasn't the gun, it was information. Sal had spent the past 2 weeks becoming intimately familiar with every aspect of Kent's operation. He knew about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the bribes paid to specific officials, and the detailed records Kent kept of every illegal transaction. That information would serve as both leverage and evidence. First bodyguard just entered the restaurant, Edgar reported. Sweep in progress. Sal moved through the shadows of the alley, approaching Giuseppe's rear entrance with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this countless times before. The lock yielded to his electronic picks in under 30 seconds, a skill learned during his early days as a detective, refined through years of private security work. The restaurant's back stairs led directly to the second floor, bypassing the main dining area where innocent customers were enjoying their meals. Sal had no intention of involving civilians in what was about to happen. Second bodyguard in position at the front entrance. Edgar's voice whispered through the earpiece. Kent's arriving now. Through a crack in the stairwell door, Sal watched Kent Maddox enter the private dining room. At 58, Kent still projected the confident bearing of a man accustomed to getting his way. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of smile that had charmed 3 mayors and countless city officials into looking the other way while he destroyed lives for profit. This was the man who'd sat at their dinner table, who'd held Matthew as a baby, who'd earned 2 decades of trust before using that access to commit the perfect murder. The rage threatened to overwhelm Sal's tactical discipline. He forced himself to breathe, to think, to remember that revenge required precision, not passion. Jessica Hart just arrived, Edgar reported. Adam Massey 2 minutes out. Sal moved into position outside the dining room, his back pressed against the wall as he listened to Kent's voice through the thin door. The Bridgeport project is moving ahead of schedule. We should have the remaining tenants cleared out by month's end. What about the Rodriguez family? A woman's voice asked, Jessica Hart, the corrupt commissioner. They're still refusing to sell. Adam will handle it, Kent replied casually. Same as always. Make it look accidental. They were planning another murder, discussing it as casually as ordering wine. Sal's hand tightened on his pistol, but he forced himself to wait. He needed all of them together, needed to record their planning session before making his move. Massey's in the building, Edgar reported. Sparks just pulled up outside. 5 more minutes. Then everyone would be in position for the truth to finally emerge. Sal activated the digital recorder clipped to his tactical vest. Every word spoken in that room would be preserved, documented, and eventually delivered to the few honest officials left in Chicago's power structure. But first, Kent Maddox would face judgment from a father who'd lost everything. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. The private dining room fell silent as Sal stepped through the door, his presence transforming the comfortable criminal conspiracy into something far more dangerous. Kent Maddox froze with a wine glass halfway to his lips, his face cycling through surprise, recognition, and finally, fear. "Evening, Kent," Sal said quietly, closing the door behind him and engaging the lock. "Don't mind me. Please continue your discussion about murdering the Rodriguez family." The other conspirators reacted according to their natures. Jessica Hart, the corrupt commissioner, immediately reached for her purse, probably seeking her phone to call for help. Adam Massey, the arsonist, coiled in his chair like a predator assessing threat levels. Sean Sparks, the alderman, simply stared in bovine confusion. But Kent's response revealed why he'd stayed one step ahead of the law for so many years. After the initial shock, his expression smoothed into the practiced charm that had fooled 2 decades of friends and colleagues. "Sal, what are you doing here? I thought you'd be home with Nicole, grieving for Matthew." The false sympathy in his voice made Sal's finger tighten on the trigger, but he maintained control. "I am grieving," Sal replied, his voice carrying the lethal quiet of a stalking predator. "But I'm also investigating my son's murder." Murder? Kent's performance was Academy Award caliber, the perfect mixture of shock and confusion. The police said it was an accident. Matthew lost control on that curve. After you had him followed and threatened. Sal produced his phone, playing the audio recording of Kent's earlier conversation. "You just admitted planning to kill the Rodriguez family, same as always. How many families have you murdered, Kent?" The dining room's atmosphere shifted as the recordings played. Detailed discussions of arson, bribery, and systematic intimidation filled the space, each word condemning Kent and his associates beyond any possibility of denial. Jessica Hart made her move, lunging for the emergency button installed beneath the table. Sal's training took over, a fluid motion that left her unconscious on the floor before she could raise an alarm. "Jesus Christ," Sean Sparks whispered. "Sal, you need to calm down. We can work this out, like you worked it out with Matthew." Sal's voice cut through the alderman's babbling. "He was 18 years old, Kent. 18. He had his whole life ahead of him, and you killed him because he discovered your property scheme." Kent abandoned his innocent act, his mask finally slipping to reveal the cold calculations underneath. "Your son was naive, Sal. He didn't understand how the world really works. Some people get hurt so that progress can happen. That's just reality." "Reality?" Sal stepped closer, and Kent instinctively recoiled. "Let me share some reality with you. I know about every property you've stolen, every official you've bribed, every family you've displaced or murdered. I know about the Cayman accounts, the shell companies, the arsonist you keep on payroll." He gestured toward Adam Massey. "Mr. Massey here has been very busy. The Hernandez family, Maria Santos, James Wheeler, all burned alive so you could steal their homes." Massey finally spoke, his voice hoarse with barely contained violence. "You're dead, Garner. Soon as I get out of here." "You're not getting out of here," Sal interrupted. "None of you are." The finality in his voice penetrated even Kent's arrogance. "Sal, be reasonable. Yes, we've bent some rules, but bent rules." The fury finally crept into Sal's voice. "You murdered innocent families. You killed my son. You destroyed lives for profit while pretending to be my friend." Sal produced a thick manila envelope from his tactical vest. "This contains copies of everything. Bank records, recorded conversations, witness statements, forensic evidence. Every crime, every bribe, every murder you've committed." He tossed the envelope onto the table. "Your choice is simple, Kent. Confess to Matthew's murder and the Riverside Gardens killings, or watch me destroy every aspect of your life piece by piece." Kent's laugh was bitter and desperate. "You think anyone will believe you? I have judges, prosecutors, half the city council in my pocket. You're just a grieving father with a conspiracy theory." "Am I?" Sal smiled, and something in that expression made Kent's blood freeze. "Edgar, send the package." His earpiece crackled with his lieutenant's response. "Package sent, boss." FBI Field Office, Chicago Tribune, Channel 7 News, and the U.S. Attorney's Office all received their copies simultaneously. Kent's face went white as the implications hit him. "You can't." "Already did." By tomorrow morning, your entire operation will be front-page news. Federal investigators will freeze your accounts. Your co-conspirators will be arrested, and every family you victimized will have grounds for wrongful death lawsuits. Sal moved closer, close enough that Kent could see the controlled violence in his steel gray eyes. But that's just the legal consequences. You kill my son, Kent. That requires a more personal response. The room held its breath as Sal drew his pistol, the subsonic rounds chambered and ready. Kent Maddox, the untouchable developer who'd murdered with impunity, finally understood he was facing judgment from someone beyond his reach. Please, Sal. We were friends. Friends don't murder each other's children. The shot was barely audible, but its impact was permanent. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. Dawn broke over Chicago as Salvatore Garner sat in his study, watching the news coverage unfold across multiple screens. Channel 7's morning anchor spoke in breathless tones about the explosive corruption scandal rocking City Hall, while CNN's Chicago correspondent detailed the federal investigation now consuming Kent Maddox's business empire. But the real satisfaction came from his secure laptop, where he monitored the systematic dismantling of everything Kent had built. The FBI had moved with impressive speed. By 3 a.m., agents were executing search warrants across the city, Kent's offices, his various properties, the homes of his co-conspirators. The Cayman accounts were frozen, the shell companies exposed, and a federal grand jury was already being convened. Edgar Mora entered the study carrying coffee and the morning's intelligence briefing. Jessica Hart was found unconscious in Giuseppe's dining room around midnight. She's talking to federal investigators now, trying to cut a deal. And the others? Adam Massey disappeared sometime after our operation concluded. Sean Sparks is in federal custody, singing like a canary about every bribe he's ever taken. Edgar paused, studying his boss's expression. Kent Maddox was found dead in his office building this morning. Single gunshot wound to the head. Apparent suicide, according to the police report. Sal nodded without emotion. The official story would protect everyone involved while ensuring Kent's crimes dominated the headlines. The Chicago PD had closed the investigation before it began. After all, who would mourn a murderous real estate developer who'd killed innocent families? What about our exposure? Sal asked. Clean. Security cameras at Giuseppe's malfunctioned conveniently between 7:30 and 8:45 p.m. yesterday. No witnesses, no evidence connecting us to Kent's final hours. Officially, he killed himself rather than face federal prosecution. The cover story held up under scrutiny because it made perfect sense. Faced with imminent arrest, asset forfeiture, and life in prison, Kent Maddox had chosen the coward's exit. The media would spend weeks dissecting his crimes, not questioning the circumstances of his death. Nicole appeared in the doorway wearing her black funeral dress, her auburn hair pulled back in the severe style she'd favored during her prosecutorial career. The service starts in 2 hours. Matthew's funeral would take place at St. Alphonsus Church, where he'd been baptized 18 years ago. The same altar where he'd received First Communion, where he'd served as an altar boy, where he'd planned to marry someday and bring his own children for baptism. Instead, they were saying goodbye. Any regrets? Nicole asked quietly, settling beside him on the leather couch where they'd watched Matthew grow from infant to young man. Sal considered the question seriously. He'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, done things that would have horrified his younger, more idealistic self. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Matthew's face on that surveillance footage, mouthing "find the truth" before walking into Kent's trap. None, he said finally. The system failed him. It would have failed those other families too. Someone had to hold Kent accountable. And Adam Massey? The arsonist's disappearance hadn't been accidental. Edgar's team had intercepted Massey leaving Giuseppe's, and the man responsible for burning children alive had faced his own reckoning in a warehouse on the south side. His body wouldn't be found for weeks, if ever. He murdered 3 families, Nicole. The Hernandez children were 6 and 8 years old when he burned them alive in their beds. She nodded, her prosecutor's instincts understanding the calculus of justice. Some crimes exceeded the legal system's ability to provide adequate punishment. Some monsters required more direct intervention. The doorbell rang, followed by voices in the hallway. Edgar was greeting the early arrivals for the pre-funeral gathering, colleagues, clients, and Matthew's friends coming to pay their respects. Zachary Woodard was among the first. The young man who'd received Matthew's final text message, still struggling with guilt over not taking his friend's fears seriously. Sal found him standing in Matthew's room, staring at the journalism posters. "I should have believed him," Zachary said without turning around. "When he said he was being followed, I should have." "You couldn't have known," Sal interrupted gently. "Kent fooled everyone, even me. The news is saying he killed himself because of some FBI investigation. They're not mentioning Matthew at all." Sal placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "The FBI investigation exists because of Matthew. He found the evidence that brought Kent down. Your friend saved lives, Zachary. The Rodriguez family won't be murdered now because Matthew exposed Kent's operation. It wasn't the complete truth, but it was a truth Zachary could live with. Sometimes the full story was too complicated, too dark, too final for public consumption." The church service was standing room only, filled with Matthew's classmates, teachers, family friends, and colleagues from Sal's business. The priest spoke about a young man taken too soon, about faith during dark times, about justice eventually prevailing. As they lowered Matthew's casket into the ground, Sal felt the weight of what he'd done and what he'd lost. His son was gone forever, that brilliant smile extinguished by a monster's greed. No amount of revenge could bring Matthew back or fill the hole in their hearts. But Kent Maddox was dead, his criminal empire destroyed, and the families he'd threatened were safe. In the arithmetic of justice, that had to be enough. As the mourners dispersed, Nicole took Sal's hand. "What now?" He looked across Lincoln Park Cemetery toward downtown Chicago, where federal agents were still unraveling the corruption that had poisoned the city's government. Kent's death was just the beginning. His co-conspirators would face trials, his victims would receive compensation, and his properties would be returned to the communities he destroyed. "Now we rebuild," Sal said quietly. "We make sure Matthew's sacrifice meant something." The war was over, but its consequences would echo through Chicago's power structure for years to come. Salvatore Garner had kept his promise to his son. He'd found the truth and ensured it saw daylight. Justice, he reflected, sometimes required stepping outside the law to preserve it. Chapter 8. The Cleanup. 3 weeks after Matthew's funeral, Salvatore Garner stood in the penthouse conference room of the federal building, watching Assistant U.S. Attorney Margaret Blair present the government's case against the Maddox corruption network. The evidence spread across multiple tables painted a picture of systematic criminality that had infected Chicago's government for years. 18 indictments so far, Margaret announced to the assembled task force of FBI agents, federal prosecutors, and Chicago PD internal affairs investigators. We're looking at RICO charges, murder conspiracies, arson, bribery, and money laundering. This is the biggest public corruption case in Chicago since Operation Silver Shovel. Sal sat in the back of the room, officially present as a consultant on security matters, but actually monitoring the investigation's progress. His decision to leak the evidence simultaneously to law enforcement and media had created unstoppable momentum. Even Chicago's notoriously corrupt political machine couldn't suppress a story this explosive. Agent Ruth Jones, the FBI's lead investigator, addressed the room with the clinical precision of someone who'd spent her career dismantling criminal enterprises. Kent Maddox's suicide prevented us from flipping him against his political contacts, but his records were meticulous. We have documented proof of bribes paid to 3 aldermen, 2 city commissioners, and a Cook County judge. The suicide story had held up perfectly. Kent's apparent guilt and desperation provided a neat explanation that satisfied media curiosity while protecting Sal's involvement. The official investigation focused on the corruption scheme itself, not the circumstances of Kent's death. But Sal knew the real cleanup was just beginning. Edgar Mora found him in the parking garage after the briefing, carrying a tablet loaded with surveillance reports. Adam Massey's body was discovered this morning in a construction site on the south side. Apparent drug overdose, according to the preliminary investigation. The official story wasn't technically false. Massey had indeed died from an injection, though the substance involved wasn't recreational narcotics. Edgar's team had been thorough and professional, ensuring the arsonist responsible for multiple family murders faced appropriate consequences. Any complications? Sal asked. None. Massey had a history of substance abuse and had been increasingly erratic since the FBI investigation began. His death looks consistent with someone spiraling out of control after their criminal empire collapsed. They walked to Sal's car in comfortable silence, two professionals who understood that some jobs required actions beyond legal boundaries. Edgar had been Sal's partner during their police years, had seen the same victims failed by plea bargains and technicalities, had watched guilty men walk free while their victims suffered. Neither man felt any moral conflict about Adam Massey's fate. The drive back to Garner Security Solutions took them through the Riverside Gardens neighborhood where Kent's scheme had begun. The area showed signs of renewal. Community gardens where burned buildings once stood, new affordable housing under construction, families returning to streets they'd been forced to abandon. The Rodriguez family decided to stay, Edgar reported. Federal investigators froze the demolition orders and returned their property rights. They're planning to rebuild. Small victories, but meaningful ones. Matthew's investigation had saved lives and preserved communities that would have been destroyed by Kent's greed. At the office, Sal found Nicole waiting in his private conference room, surrounded by legal documents and wearing the focused expression that had made her legendary in Chicago's courthouses. The wrongful death settlements are moving forward, she announced without preamble. Families affected by Kent's arson scheme will receive compensation from the federal asset forfeiture. It won't bring back their loved ones, but it will help them rebuild. Sal studied the papers, legal briefs, victim impact statements, and forensic accountings of Kent's stolen wealth. The federal government was doing its job, ensuring Kent's victims received some measure of justice through the courts. But justice for Matthew remained personal. Any word on the remaining co-conspirators? Sal asked. Jessica Hart is cooperating fully with federal investigators. She'll likely receive a reduced sentence in exchange for testimony against the others. Sean Sparks is refusing to cooperate. His corruption charges will likely result in 15 to 20 years. The legal system was grinding forward with its usual measured pace, building cases that would stand up in court and survive appeals. It was necessary work, but insufficient for Sal's purposes. Some crimes demanded more immediate consequences. That evening, Sal drove to St. Alphonsus Church for the memorial mass Nicole had organized for Matthew's 1-month anniversary. The same altar where they'd said goodbye now hosted a celebration of his life. Friends sharing memories, teachers discussing his potential, classmates reading from his journalism projects. Zachary Woodard approached Sal after the service, carrying a printed manuscript bound in black leather. I've been working on this since the funeral, Zachary explained. A complete account of Matthew's investigation, everything he discovered about Kent's operation. I want to submit it to journalism schools, maybe get published. Sal accepted the manuscript, feeling its weight both physical and symbolic. Matthew's revelation, how an 18-year-old journalist exposed Chicago's biggest corruption scandal. He deserves credit for bringing Kent down, Zachary continued. The FBI might have gotten the evidence, but Matthew found it first. He died trying to expose the truth. It was a sanitized version of events, but an important one. Matthew's sacrifice needed to be remembered and honored, his courage recognized by the journalism community he'd hoped to join. I'll make sure this gets to the right people, Sal promised, meaning editors at major newspapers who owed him favors and journalism professors who understood the importance of protecting young investigators. Walking home through Lincoln Park, Sal reflected on the past month's events. Kent Maddox was dead, his criminal empire destroyed, his co-conspirators facing federal prosecution. The families he'd threatened were safe, his victims were receiving compensation, and his corruption had been exposed for the world to see. But the larger system remained unchanged. Other Kent Maddoxes were operating in other cities, protected by other networks of corrupt officials. The institutional failures that had allowed such crimes to flourish continued unchallenged. Matthew's death had resulted in justice for his specific case, but it hadn't reformed the system that had failed him. That would require a different kind of war, fought on different battlefields with different weapons. Sal was ready for that war too. Chapter 9. The Legacy. 6 months after Matthew's death, Salvatore Garner stood before the marble headstone that marked his son's final resting place. The inscription was simple: Matthew Garner, journalist, truth seeker, beloved son. Below that, a quote Matthew had kept on his desk: "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion." Fresh flowers adorned the grave. Sunflowers, Matthew's favorite, placed there by Nicole during her weekly visits. Sal's visits were less frequent, but more intense. Moments of communication with the son who'd inspired a transformation he was still understanding. The Chicago skyline stretched before him, glass and steel monuments to commerce and power that concealed the ongoing corruption investigations triggered by Matthew's work. Federal prosecutors had secured convictions against 14 officials in the Maddox network, with more trials scheduled throughout the year. But Sal's attention focused on a different kind of monument: the bronze plaque recently installed at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. The Matthew Garner Memorial Fellowship would fund investigative journalism projects that exposed corruption and protected vulnerable communities. It was Nicole's idea, a way to channel their grief into something constructive that honored their son's ideals. The first recipient is a young woman from Detroit. Nicole's voice came from behind him. She approached carrying a bouquet of white roses, her weekly tribute to the child they'd lost. She's investigating housing discrimination in federal programs. Sal accepted the flowers, adding them to Matthew's growing memorial garden. Other families had begun leaving tributes. The Rodriguez family brought handwritten thank you notes. The Riverside Gardens community placed small American flags, and Matthew's classmates left copies of their own investigative articles. "Any regrets about how we handled Kent?" Nicole asked, settling beside him on the stone bench Sal had installed. The question came up occasionally during their private conversations, usually triggered by news coverage of the ongoing federal prosecutions. The media had canonized Kent Maddox as a cautionary tale of corruption and suicide, never suspecting the truth about his final hours. "None," Sal replied, meaning it completely. The legal system would have failed Matthew, just like it failed Kent's other victims. Some people can only be stopped through direct action. Nicole nodded, her prosecutor's instincts understanding the calculus they'd applied. Kent Maddox had murdered children, destroyed families, and corrupted an entire city's government for profit. His death had saved lives and prevented future atrocities that the courts might never have adequately punished. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the city Matthew had hoped to help reform through journalism. His dreams of exposing corruption and holding powerful people accountable had been realized, just not in the way he'd imagined. Edgar Moore's voice crackled through Sal's secure phone, pulling him back to present concerns. "Boss, we have a situation developing in Milwaukee. Real estate developer named Jeffrey Rice is using similar tactics to Kent Maddox: property fraud, intimidation, suspicious fires." Sal felt the familiar surge of cold calculation that had served him so well during the Kent Maddox operation. "Send me everything you have. Full background, associates, financial records, the works." Already compiling the files. This looks like another multi-year scheme with political connections. Local law enforcement is either compromised or overwhelmed. The pattern was depressingly familiar. Powerful criminals hiding behind legitimate business facades while destroying lives for profit. The legal system would eventually catch up to Jeffrey Rice, but how many families would suffer while prosecutors built their cases? "Nicole," Sal said quietly, "how would you feel about expanding our operations?" She understood immediately. During their marriage, Nicole had learned to read the subtle shift in his voice that preceded particularly dangerous decisions. "You're thinking about Milwaukee. I'm thinking about all of them. Kent wasn't Maddox unique. There are dozens of criminals just like him operating in cities across the country, using the same tactics, buying the same protections, victimizing the same. Nicole considered this, her legal mind weighing implications and consequences. The federal system is reactive, not proactive. By the time prosecutors build cases against people like Kent, they've already destroyed dozens of lives. But we could be proactive, Sal continued. Garner Security Solutions has resources and capabilities that law enforcement doesn't. We could identify these operations early, gather evidence, and ensure appropriate consequences before more families get hurt. It was vigilantism on an organized scale, justice delivered outside legal channels by people who understood that some crimes exceeded the system's ability to provide adequate punishment. The moral complexity didn't escape either of them, but neither did the practical necessity. What about Matthew's memory? Nicole asked. He believed in legitimate journalism, legal procedures, working within the system. Sal looked at his son's headstone, remembering the young man who died, trying to expose corruption through proper channels. Matthew believed in truth and justice. The methods matter less than the results. Over the following weeks, Sal quietly restructured Garner Security Solutions to accommodate his new mission. A special division was created, officially focused on corporate security consulting, but actually identifying and neutralizing organized corruption schemes before they could destroy communities. The team included Edgar Mora, now promoted to Director of Special Operations, Steve Lacey, a former Army Ranger who specialized in surveillance and intelligence gathering, and a network of freelance operatives with backgrounds in law enforcement, military special operations, and private security. Their first target was indeed Jeffrey Rice in Milwaukee, whose property development scheme had already displaced 3 families and resulted in 2 suspicious building fires. The evidence Edgar's team gathered painted a familiar picture: bribes to city officials, intimidation of resistant tenants, and systematic fraud designed to steal valuable urban properties. But unlike Kent Maddox, Jeffrey Rice would face consequences before murdering innocent families. The operation took place on a cold Thursday evening in November. Rice was meeting with his arsonist and 2 corrupt aldermen in a private club downtown, planning the destruction of a historic apartment building whose elderly tenants had refused to relocate. Sal's team documented everything: recorded conversations, financial transfers, detailed plans for arson and murder. But instead of waiting for federal prosecutors to build their case, they took immediate action. Jeffrey Rice was found dead in his office the next morning, apparent suicide just hours before FBI agents arrived with search warrants. His co-conspirators were arrested based on evidence anonymously delivered to federal investigators, and the targeted apartment building remained safe. The pattern repeated itself in Detroit, Cleveland, and Phoenix over the following year. Corrupt developers, murderous slumlords, and their political enablers all faced the same fate: exposure, prosecution, and when necessary, more direct consequences. The media began calling it the corruption plague, a wave of suicides among real estate developers facing federal investigation. Law enforcement noted the pattern, but found no evidence connecting the deaths, no indication of outside intervention. Sal's team was that good. Standing at Matthew's grave 1 year after his death, Sal reflected on what they'd accomplished. 14 major corruption schemes had been exposed, 47 officials arrested, and countless families protected from displacement or murder. The legal system was finally catching up, with federal prosecutors creating specialized task forces to investigate real estate fraud and political corruption. Matthew's death had sparked a national conversation about accountability and justice that was slowly reforming how authorities address such crimes. But the real memorial to Matthew Garner wasn't the scholarship fund or the bronze plate.